There, welcome back to another video. This time around, it is my review of the 2024 romantic thriller, Love Lies Bleeding. Now, Love Lies Bleeding is a film that instantly skyrocketed on my most anticipated film list once I saw the trailer for it. I love the use of Bronxy Beats, Small Town Boy, in the trailer. I thought it looked right up my alley. I'm a big fan of neo-noir thrillers, and this looked fantastic. The cast was really good. You had Rose Glass behind the camera as the director, and I was honestly blown away by her directorial debut in Saint Maud. So I had honestly already been up and already been pumped to see what she was going to come up with next. So knowing her involvement, that just made it an immediate must watch for me. And after seeing it, it did not disappoint. I thought this film was phenomenal, and it's definitely one of my favorite films of 2024. The best way I can describe Love Lies Bleeding is that it's if Taylor Sheridan and David Lynch had a baby, and that baby grew up to be a big fan of Blood Simple. If that is something that sounds at all intriguing or interesting to you, you've got to check this film out. And it was a movie that just completely floored me at times because there were moments in this film where its surreal imagery just completely uh, just took me out of my comfort zone, but in a good way. It was the kind of film that has imagery in it that is nightmarish and just memorable and honestly kind of iconic in its own way. And it's such a provocative film in a multitude of different ways. So Rose Glass directed the film, and I feel she did a just absolutely grand and spectacular job yet again. Her command of the camera is exceptional. Her technique is tremendous. I mean, she's got some super ambitious type of shots on display in this film. Top down shots, shots from down below, looking up, various different types of pans and zooms, really creative usages of angles and close ups. In a lot of ways, the direction was its own character in this film. It was just as wild and daring as a lot of other aspects of the script or the performances were. Like it was just a tour de force of filmmaking. Like you were watching someone who was really coming into their own and flexing their directorial muscles in a way that was worthy of winning the bodybuilding competition, Miss Universe. It was that kind of film. I was just absolutely astonished and in awe of Rose Glass's visual eye throughout this film. Just the way that she interspersed very intimate, very realistic cinematography and direction with surreal, dreamlike imagery. It really did evoke Lynch and other filmmakers in that vein. So yeah, I think Rose Glass is without a doubt one of the one of the most impressive and genuinely and just supremely talented filmmakers uh, out there right now. And I cannot wait to see what kind of wild film that she's going to helm next, because she not only knows what she's doing, she is already a complete and total master of her craft. And Rose also co-wrote the film along with Weronika Tofilska, I think. I probably butchered her last name. And the script, for the most part, I think is very solid. I think some people might feel that it's a little bit too out there when it comes to some aspects of the story. I think it might be a story that's a turnoff for some because of the less than desirable aspects of some of these characters. But I liked that this was a screenplay that had the guts to go to places that you don't necessarily see other scripts or other films go. Like, I appreciated that it was like, no, we're not gonna sugarcoat things. We are gonna go straight for the jugular. We're gonna go uh for the knockout. And it leads to moments in the film that literally do have the impact of like a hard hitting punch from a bodybuilder, which is fitting because that's the kind of film that this is. It's one of those movies where you don't necessarily have any clear cut individuals or characters that are necessarily good, and you don't necessarily have people that are just inherently just evil. Like, there's more nuances to the characters, and there's more layers to them. And it not only makes these characters more interesting, but it also makes them more relatable because of the fact that they are fucked up. They do have these flaws. I've always liked flawed characters in films like this more than characters that are just cookie cutter. And that's what you get with the characters in this. That's what you get with Lou and Jackie, or Beth, or Daisy, or JJ, or Lou Senior. Like, you get all of that with these characters. These are not characters that are necessarily choir boys or uh, you know the cream of the crop, or the best and the brightest, but they aren't also necessarily the worst of the worst. Uh, they're a mix of different elements. They're a blend of both, and I like that you have romance that is a center of the story, and it's written in a way where it's genuinely romantic and sweet and charming enough to make you actually care about the connection between Lou and Jackie, and want them to have this happy ending, to find a way to get out of this difficult spot that they're in, but at the same time see them as the flawed people that they are. And that whole romance angle really is a great backbone for this story, because when things really start to hit the fan, you have some very compelling drama that is permeating throughout the script. It's not something that just comes and goes. So it leads to some very intense and genuinely suspenseful moments in the film's climax. And I love that this script, it just didn't pull any punches. Yeah, it shows that these are flawed characters with flawed pasts and questionable traits and characteristics, but it also shows certain aspects of relationships that don't necessarily get talked about as much because it makes people feel too uncomfortable. And what I mean by that is there's this relationship that's showcased between JJ and Beth, Lou's sister. And it's an abusive relationship. JJ abuses Beth, and the film does not shy away from showing the effects and the aftermath of that abuse. But it shows a side of this kind of relationship that a lot of people don't want to think about, which is in relationships like this, there are plenty of instances where the woman or the man in this abusive relationship, because they become codependent on this other person, they don't necessarily want that abuser to be punished. They don't want the abuser to get their just desserts, so to speak, and they don't want that abuser to get killed. And so when that happens in this script, when spoiler, Jackie snaps one night and has an intense bout of road rage. I mean, it's not road rage, it's roid rage. But she gets on the road and then rages. But she has this intense bout of roid rage because she sees how much pain Lou, her girlfriend, is feeling because of the damage that JJ did to Lou's sister Beth. I hit her so hard she wound up in the hospital and like half her face is all swollen up. And Jackie was like, "Fuck that. I'm going to take care of this motherfucker." And so then she goes to his house and just smashes his head in, and the the wife of this abuser, JJ, when she discovers what happened to him later, she's hysterical. She's not celebrating. She's not happy that her abuser is dead and thanking her sister Lou for taking this guy out and doing the very thing that she wishes she had the guts or the balls, so to speak, to do after all this time. No, she's upset and she's distraught and she's angry. I appreciated that these writers were, you know what? This is just as real of a situation when it comes to these kind of relationships as the opposite. So I appreciated that. That's something that you don't necessarily see a lot of because people don't want to talk about it. They don't want to focus on that. It's too uncomfortable. And I appreciated that the screenwriters were like, no, I know it's uncomfortable, but we need to show this. And it winds up striking a conversation when it comes to the audience of, you know, how should you react in a situation like this, and really causes a lot of questions because when you see something like that, you see the aftermath of the man's abuse. Like my immediate reaction was kick his ass, and when you see the trauma that happens because of something like that, then it makes you start to kind of question things a little bit, and you're kind of like, well, maybe there could have been a different way to handle this instead of bashing the guy's head in. to the point where he literally has half a face. But it's just one of those elements of the script that I think was just handled so well, because it's a very difficult thing and it is very uncomfortable, but the writers handled it really well to the point where it created an extra layer of realism to the script despite its surreal imagery. Which, on that note, I, I I love those scenes. I love that aspect of this film. It makes it unpredictable at times when it comes to what you're going to see when it comes to hallucinations or different types of surreal imagery. The bodybuilding competition scene. I don't even want to spoil it. Like, you'll have to see it for yourself, and then you'll see exactly what I mean. It's something that I genuinely do feel someone like David Lynch would really appreciate, and he would be like, now that's weird, even for me. uh, and I did Eraserhead, and there's even a scene near the end where Jackie literally hulks out and becomes a giantess. Um, like she's the next 50-foot woman. But the way that it's handled, it's it's meant to be surreal. It's meant to be crazy and out there. And I think it's honestly meant to be a little humorous too. So it's not really something that takes itself so seriously that it takes you completely out of the film. Because the script does a great job having these little elements of surreal imagery throughout it. So when you see these kind of scenes, it doesn't come across like it's too much or it's too out of the script's depth when it comes to the tone. So it's not too much of a tonal shift at all. And I also really like the ending. It could have ended a way where Lou and Jackie, they find a way to escape the predicament they're in. The bad guy, Lou Senior, he gets his due. They escape, and the last scene in the film, the last shot of the film is them in this dream where they're running away together and they're running around in this field and there's the stars in the sky and they're wearing these sparkling outfits and they're happy. I could totally see the film just ending there, and then it's like, oh, it's, that they're on the run, but and they think that it's the best thing ever and they're happy. But it's all fantasy, like a lot of these other scenes throughout the movie. But they didn't go that route. And they didn't go the route of, oh, here we have this fantasy, and then there's the whole cold hard reality where either they die or they get arrested and they get sent to jail and now they're in prison for life, or they get the death penalty. Like, it didn't go that route either. They did manage to go on the run together, but it's not set up as something that is cookie cutter or clear cut. It's very much up to interpretation. Like, you can interpret them going on to live long and happy lives together on the run and never getting caught. Or you can interpret it the opposite way, where they get caught, they serve time for their crime, something happens, and they wind up splitting apart from one another, or they wind up getting convicted of the crime and they die together, or they try to get on the winning side of a showdown with the police, and then they lose, and then they lose their lives. Like, you can interpret it the multitude of different ways. And I also appreciate that there's still a good amount of dark humor in the ending, where this girl who could have been an informant, they think that she's dead because she got shot earlier by Jackie because she was forced to do it by Lou's father, and she's not dead yet. So there's this whole scene where Kristen Stewart's character Lou is just strangling this girl and then smoking a cigarette and throwing the dead body on the side of the road, and it's a very stark contrast to their fantasized vision of what their life together will be. And it's a good way to provide that contrast without being too cliched with, oh, we have the scene where they're running in the field with the stars, and then, oh, here's the harsh reality of it. Like, it takes a different approach to it that I did like. And I appreciate the bodybuilding aspect of it. It was very unique. It definitely added a different flair to the story and the script, especially with Jackie's character. And when she started doing all the steroids, that's when the surreal aspect of the script really started to kick into high gear. And I love how the more steroids that she takes, the crazier and the wilder and the more intense and just unpredictable and violent the film gets, as if the script itself was on roids and it was dealing with all of the type of side effects that people get when they take steroids or do too much of it. So yeah, it's not a story that I would say, even though I'm saying that there are a lot of unpredictable elements, there are predictable moments. There are things when it comes to the true, I wouldn't say true crime, but when it comes to the aspects of the script that involve murder and an investigation and all of that, the way that it handles those elements, it's not something that you haven't seen before. So the script isn't flexing any new muscles when it comes to that, but having it combined with the bodybuilding stuff and a love story that involves two women definitely does give it a different feel than your average neo noir thriller of this type. And one other thing I want to mention is that, yes, there's a lot of sex scenes between these two women, but for the most part, it's handled very tastefully, and it's not something that feels like exploitative. It's not something that feels like it's there just for shock value. And that's something that easily could have happened with a film like this. And instead, it's handled like any other love story is. If you made one of the characters a man, like for example, Jackie is Jack instead, and you have a lot of these sex scenes between a man and a woman, uh, I think it's pretty much handled and written the same way as that kind of story. So but with the lesbian perspective, for these two characters. So it's similar in that way, but it's not necessarily something where the writers overdo it or they make things so over the top, so to speak, in terms of their relationship to try to differentiate it so dramatically from other relationships that feature men and women in these kind of films. And speaking of something similar to that, the script also isn't a message story. It's not trying to shove a message down your throat about how much better women are versus men, There's no sexist stuff. It's not really a feminist fantasy, despite the fact that you have these two women who are the leads. That was incredibly refreshing for me. This is not a message film. This isn't there. I don't even think there was any politics. It was just a case of two women who fall in love and do some questionable and really fucked up shit. They get in deep and they are trying to do whatever they can to get out of it and survive. That's what the story is. It's in a lot of ways it's kind of it's also a survival story. It's a love story, but it's also a survival story. It's not anything that's particularly super pretentious. There is some subtext that you can glean from it, but not in the way where I think it's being shoved down your throat. It's in a more subtle way. It's more under the surface, which is what I honestly feel films like this should do, or films should do in general. I don't think subtext should be just up front and center and up close and personal. I think it should be something that's like just in the veins of a script, not the bones, or it's not the muscle. It's just in the veins, and I think this is definitely a script that represents that. And the cast is just amazing. I mean, Kristen Stewart, honestly, this is one of her best performances as Lou. Katy O'Brian, just a total knockout, and a performance that I feel honestly is a star-making turn. Just so many different layers and nuances to her performance. The way that she effectively portrayed this girl who is looking for not only a way for her to obtain her dream, which is to compete at this bodybuilding competition in Vegas, but also to find someone to love, that loves her for who she is and accepts her for who she is, and the conflict that arises from that, the effects that the steroids have on her and her psyche and everything. It's just a tremendous performance. It really is. And in some ways, it honestly reminded me of Rachel Tickleton, who I think is a very talented actress. So her performance, in a lot of ways, kind of reminded me of what Rachel brought to a lot of the films that she was in. And her and Kristen Stewart, they were just a very dynamic pair. They were so good together. Their chemistry was off the charts. Ed Harris looking like he's the Ripper from The Last Action Hero with his long stringy hair and his bald head. But despite, reminding me of The Last Action Hero, it's an excellent performance. Ed Harris is so good at playing these steely, cold, just bastards. Jena Malone, uh, she really nailed a difficult character. Beth is a character that I think a lot of people are not going to like because of the way that she reacts and deals with her abusive husband. But it was a difficult role, and she just excelled at it. Definitely made you understand why she was feeling the way that she did about what was going on with the relationship with JJ, but at the same time she wasn't afraid to show herself and not necessarily the best light, because there's a scene near the end where she's honestly pretty nasty. Anna Baryshnikov as Daisy, she was also fine as the girl who has this affection for Lou, and in a lot of ways wishes that Lou loved her the most, but Lou is just not really feeling the same way about her. Dave Franco plays a just absolute son of a bitch as JJ. I think it's just a total just piece of shit, but he does it well. And the film features some really special cinematography by Ben Fortisman. Even though it's not a film that takes place in probably the most striking setting, the way that the film is shot and presented makes it pop because of the use of colors, especially red lighting and shadows and a lot of other different things. Like it's just a really nice looking film. Especially love the way that they utilize the night sky in the movie. Just beautiful. And the editing by Mark Towns is terrific. Like just some tremendous work. So many scenes in the film are just so visually enthralling because of the way that they're edited. They're quick when they need to be, but they also are slower and more methodical when necessary. Uh, it's just a really fine film when it comes to the technical merits of it. I like the score as well by Clint Mansell. It's definitely a score that is very much a throwback synthesizer heavy score, but it really fits for an 80s uh, movie that takes place in the late 80s, and it has a lot of atmosphere and adds so much extra mood and muscle to the movie. And it's an A24 film that isn't like 2 or 2.5 hours. It's only 104 minutes and it goes by at a pretty dang quick pace. You take away the end credits, it's only, I think, like a little bit over an hour and a half. So it's almost uh, uh an hour and 40 something minutes, but you take away the end credits, it's not that long. So it's not a film that overdoes itself, overexerts itself when it comes to the runtime. It's got a good pace to it. Doesn't spend too long establishing characters before it gets into the drama or the romance or the different arcs of the story. And yeah, despite the fact that, yeah, it's not necessarily telling a story that hasn't been told before. It's another story of a couple who get embroiled in some messed up stuff and they're doing whatever they can to get out of it and still um, have their hearts beating and still be holding hands by the end of the film. You know, it's that kind of story, but because of the surreal nature of the script, because of the different perspective that it provides with the two female leads and their love for one another, it really becomes something fresh despite some of these familiar elements. So yeah, that's my thoughts and my review of Love Lies Bleeding. And thanks for watching, and I'll see you later. See ya.